Old Ariang sighed as he said that. This young king, whom he decided to follow at his lowest point in life, turned out to be the most unique person ever. The situation at Zenit was very special. Nothing similar to it happened in the last 60 years. If this were any other affiliated kingdom, the only solution would be to surrender to Crown Prince Arshavin. However, to Chambord it felt like child's play. The absolute individual strength allowed the king to jump out of the game and observe everything as a bystander. He was in control and he could rewrite rules if he wanted to. Therefore, Zenith's god of war was like a clown in Faye's eyes. This was true power. When a person's individual strength reached a certain level, he or she would be able to ignore the military and masters of an empire. All sorts of conspiracies and traps would be useless. Unfortunately, there were just too many things that old Ariang couldn't predict. If he knew that Emperor Yasin, who was rumored to be very ill, almost killed a Sun-class lord in the mythical palace, his judgment would change. At least he would know that Faye wasn't invincible in Zenith yet. Of course, the king had many trump cards that other people couldn't even imagine. If Chambord and Zenith had to go separate ways, even though Emperor Yasin was powerful, Chambord wouldn't be at a disadvantage. The only thing was that Faye was thinking about the bigger picture, and he didn't want the situation to worsen. In addition, Crown Prince Arshavin's will didn't represent the royal family's will. The person who was still in control of the empire was the actor named Yasin. He fooled everyone with his act, but he no longer could continue the act after the trip to the mythical altar. What old Ariang said to the warriors of Chambord was good. He warned these guys who were simple-minded not to cause more troubles for the king, and he also didn't hinder the morale. Instead, the warriors of Chambord actually got even more confident. It achieved 3 objectives at the same time. As they continued to chat, the conversation went back to their old comrades. After fighting alongside guys like Shevchenko and Rybri, I sure do miss them. Too bad that they aren't a part of Chambord. Otherwise, if we could all serve His Majesty, it would be a lot better than getting individually bullied by that damn crown prince. Drogba scratched his head and said emotionally. What he said resonated with the other warriors. For the last while, the warriors of Chambord, the native commanders in Dual Flag City, and the commanders in the Wolf Teeth Legion, fought alongside each other, and they developed a friendship that only belonged to men. Therefore, suddenly separating from those great people made the warriors of Chambord a little sad. That is unfortunate. If they could come back with us, it would be awesome. I think His Majesty is also missing them. In the end, the atmosphere was so sad that even old Ariang, who was usually calm and collected, fell quiet. However, no one noticed that what they said were all heard by Angela, who walked out of the central tent coincidentally. Is Alexander having this much pressure? Angela thought, and her heart shivered. She never paid much attention to the situation of Chambord, except for when she was at St. Petersburg and tried to help Faye out with the construction of the Wolf Teeth Legion. She never wanted to participate in the management of Chambord because she didn't want to cause more trouble for her lover. This was the first time that she realized how much pressure Faye was dealing with. But what can I do for Alexander? Angela stood in front of the central tent and lightly bit her lower lips with her pearl-white teeth. She felt like she was useless. Except for feeding and clothing Faye, she felt like she couldn't do anything else. This conclusion made this girl a little depressed. He. Dumb girl, you don't need to do anything for me? Someone hugged her from behind, and a familiar voice sounded beside her ears. As long as I could embrace you like this for a few minutes every day, my life would be full of happiness and color. Alexander. Although she was used to Faye's intimate contact, she would still blush, and her heart would still race. She held onto the big hands that were around her waist with her own and said, "But Alexander, I want to do things for you." If that is the case, you could take care of the pets and train them properly. After they grow up, our Chambord will have 3 powerful dragons to protect the kingdom. It is very important. Faye comforted Angela and took her back into the central tent. Angela nodded earnestly and said, "That is no problem. I think I can manage that." The issue that was bothering this girl was easily put down by Faye's sweet words. "Angela." Faye hugged Angela tight. Marry me. Let's get our wedding set up. The girl was surprised. Her voice was even shaking. Let's do our wedding as soon as we go back to the kingdom. What do you think? Faye's voice sounded dreamy to Angela. Our wedding will be hosted in front of tens of thousands of citizens of Chambord as beautiful flow petals fall from the sky. We will stay in a castle in the sky while our citizens celebrate it with us. And all intelligent beasts in the area will come and congratulate us. I will design your wedding dress personally, and you will become the happiest, luckiest, and prettiest bride in the world. The feeling of happiness overtook Angela, and she felt a little numb. The feeling was strange, and her heart raced. The breaths by her ear made her feel like passing out. She bit her lips as another beautiful figure flashed by in her mind. After a little hesitation, she turned around and looked at Faye with a unique, earnest expression on her face. At this moment, the atmosphere got a little strange. Angela's expression scared Faye a little. As he was about to say something, the girl suddenly laughed and pressed her slender and white finger onto Faye's lips. As a playful expression flashed on her face, she laughed. Alexander, you forgot about a person. Ah! Faye felt a little guilty. He knew who Angela was talking about. Sister Elena told me about the stories about you guys. I didn't know that Elena accompanied you on so many dangerous missions. You guys fought alongside each other and experienced so much. I truly envy Elena. She is powerful and she could help you in battles. Angela caressed Faye's cheeks as she continued. I didn't know that you were in so much danger in the other world. Angela, I know, Alexander. I know you didn't tell me because you don't want me to worry. You don't have to blame Sister Elena. When we both fell into unconsciousness about a month ago, we thought that we would never see you again. In that strange dark space, there were only the two of us. In order to distract me and care for me, she told me about the stories. This naive girl would always think for other people. Therefore, Alexander, you can't just marry me. During our wedding, you couldn't just hold on to my hand. Sister Elena didn't sacrifice any less compared with me. And I hope that both Elena and I could wear the wedding dresses that you design, stand beside you, and get blessed by all the citizens of Chambord. Faye was stunned. He felt both touched and guilty. On the Azeroth continent that was ruled by the law of the jungle, males had a higher status than females. Therefore, it was common to see a man with several wives. The nobles who were even more powerful had hundreds of lovers. Almost all the kings of the affiliated kingdoms had a harem, and even the holy and powerful Holy Church implicitly allowed for a terrifying law called virginity rights. In the kingdoms and empires where this law existed, all the girls would have to give their virginity to the ruler before getting married. Therefore, marry two girls at once was a common thing, and Angela wasn't opposed to it. Angela was an empathic person. After she knew about the dangerous experiences Faye and Elena had in the other world, understood the inseparable relationships the two of them developed over time, and got close to Elena in that mysterious dark space, Angela completely accepted Elena, and that last bit of mental barrier disappeared. In a sense, what happened to Angela and Elena helped the three of them open up to each other and create harmony. Faye didn't say anything. He only hugged onto the girl in his arms tighter. Diablo World. Faye and Elena stood outside the tomb where the final boss in Lutgolian was hiding. This was Faye's second time fighting the Lord of Pain Duriel that looked like a huge bug, as a barbarian. The gloomy and dark underground passage was filled with a nose-piercing smell of blood, and the air was moist. The blood of monsters was everywhere and formed puddles, and it stained the magic battle boots that Faye and Elena were wearing. The corpses of the monsters they killed were lying around them. Under the illumination of the ancient magic lights, the terrifying battleground could rival with hell. Faye inserted the Heradric staff, the item he got from completing the previous quests, into the orifice in the center of the Circle of Seven Symbols, and a secret passage to where Duriel was hiding opened. Duriel, this fat bug, is one of the top figures in hell. I hope that we could get some great items from it. Other components of the Immortal King set would be best. Faye prayed in his mind before he looked at the Valkyrie beside him and said, Elena, let's go. As they stepped into the portal, they entered a special place, and the angry roars sounded before the powerful winds came at him. Ha! This fat bug sure is lovely, Faye laughed. Since Elena was behind him, he didn't try to dodge. Instead, he held onto two crystal swords that he got from killing monsters and charged at it. Bam! The energy waves almost destroyed this tomb. The space started to shake, and clouds of dust fell from the ceiling and reduced the visibility. A huge force got passed onto the two swords, and Faye was forced back one step. The crystal swords in his hands cried and cracked, and the huge bug, Duriel, roared angrily as its huge body got knocked away. The benefit of giving all attribute points to strength showed. Compared with Faye, who specialized in physical strength, even the boss Duriel couldn't rival him in this aspect. Wow! This boss' physical strength is even weaker than Blackie. Faye got more confident as his understanding of the bosses in the nightmare mode got clearer. However, the two blue crystal swords Faye used also got destroyed in the process. Whoosh! 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 A series of air-piercing noises sounded, and many magic arrows flew past Faye and targeted Duriel that was still flying in midair. The beautiful mercenary started her fierce attacks as well. Even though Duriel was angry and went berserk, its attacks such as Ice Blast didn't pose any threats to the two invaders. Faye and Elena coordinated too well, and they clearly had the advantage. 10 minutes later. Huh? Ahahaha. Damn, I'm lucky. I got what I wanted. Faye stood in front of Duriel's huge corpse and laughed out loud even though Elena was right there with him. He was holding on to a huge hammer that was longer than himself. Immortal King's Stone Crusher. It was a component of the Immortal King item set. This hammer was black, and its style was simple. It was made from an unknown metal, and it felt very thick and powerful. Just by looking at it, one could tell that it had a history with it. Just the handle of this hammer was about 2 meters long. The end of the handle was about the circumference of an egg, and the handle got thicker as it approached the huge metal hammerhead. Ancient patterns were engraved onto the handle, and they looked like coiled dragons. The handle felt warm, but it wasn't slippery. The hammerhead was like a huge barrel, and fist-sized spikes were placed in an orderly fashion on the body of the hammerhead. One side of the hammerhead was flat, and the other side was pointy like a nail. The tip of this end was giving off a silver light, and it felt like it was going to penetrate through people's souls. It looked bloodthirsty and destructive. No wonder it was the legendary weapon of the Immortal King, Bulkathos. The visuals alone were enough to scare people. A star-level warrior wouldn't even be able to lift up this heavy metal hammer, let alone using it in battle. Even though Faye's barbarian character had a ton of physical strength, this hammer wasn't that light in his hands. It felt just right. Almost all of Faye's weapons were destroyed in the battle with Domenech. Even his dual swords, Bulkathos' children, were shattered by the Sword of Fire Judgment. Faye lacked a proper weapon, and this Immortal King's Stone Crusher came just in time. Faye had added a few skill points into Polearm Mastery in normal mode, so he didn't find it difficult to use this hammer. Instead, he felt like he could better unleash the violent and ferocious force of a barbarian. After laughing, Faye calmed down and started to check out the detailed statistics of this weapon. Immortal King's Stone Crusher was also known as Ogre Maul. Damage, 431 to 538. This meant that every strike was equivalent to the full-on strike of a low-tier New Moon Elite. This was the most powerful magic weapon Faye had seen so far. Required level, Nightmare Mode level 40. Required strength, Nightmare Mode 100, plus 250% damage to undead, plus 200% damage to demons, plus 200% enhanced damage, plus 40% attack speed, plus 211 to 397 fire damage with 2 set items. Plus 7 to 477 lightning damage with 3 set items, plus 127 to 364 cold damage for 6 seconds with 4 set items, plus 204 poison damage over 6 seconds with 5 set items, plus 250 to 361 magic damage with a complete set. The additional power of this weapon almost made Faye's eyeballs pop out of his eye sockets. Although he didn't know what kind of statistics semi-god tier combat weapons and god tier combat weapons would have if they were converted into the metrics in Diablo world, Faye knew that these statistics for Immortal King's Stone Crusher was insane. Unfortunately, including Immortal King's Stone Crusher, Faye only had 2 set items. Therefore, the additive lightning, cold, poison, and magic damages couldn't be realized. So far, only 211 to 397 fire damage could be used in battle. However, Faye's attention was soon attracted by something else. Indestructible. It meant that the durability of this weapon was infinite, could handle all types of attacks and wouldn't break. It was an insane attribute. If Faye had this hammer in his hand when fighting against Domenech's Sword of Fire Judgment, he might be able to block that strike using this hammer. His weapon wouldn't be destroyed, and he wouldn't be placed in the dangerous situation where he didn't have anything to use to block the strike. This weapon was the perfect god-tier item for the barbarian. Only the great and violent physical strength of the barbarian could unleash its power to the maximum. With this hammer in hand, the barbarian would be able to use the fundamental physical strength to swing the hammer and destroy enemies. Even the gods couldn't harm this weapon. With the hammer in hand, Faye closed his eyes and caressed it. He felt like he had sensed its eagerness for battle. This weapon had its own soul and it was made for combat. Don't worry. In my hand, you will get to drink the blood of powerful masters. Faye opened his eyes and placed Immortal King's Stone Crusher into his weapon slot. He instantly felt like he became one with the hammer, and he could summon it easily. When he lightly swung the hammer, a series of thunder-like and dragon roar-like noises sounded, and it felt like even the space was being torn open. With the hammer in his hand, Faye felt heroic and invincible. He felt like defeating all the powerful masters in the world. After enjoying that marvelous feeling, the king reluctantly put Immortal King's Stone Crusher away. Then, he started to check out the other items that Duriel dropped. There were 4 other items. 3 of them were enveloped by orange lights, indicating that they were level 6 items. They weren't bad, but they could no longer excite Faye unless they got unique properties. These 3 orange items were a pair of metal gauntlets, a big belt, and a delicate hawk helmet. Faye picked them up and used 3 identify scrolls. After reading their properties, he realized that they were average. Since Domenech destroyed Faye's gauntlets in battle, this pair of gauntlets named Finder's Touch was equipped by him. The other 2 items were put inside his storage space. He was planning to sell them when he got back to the city. Except for these 3 orange items, there was a green level 7 set item. It was an ancient silver bow. Faye was excited, and he used an identify scroll. The name and properties of this bow were instantly revealed. Mavina's Caster, Grand Matron Bow. It was a component of another top-tier item set. This bow was the weapon component of the best item set for the Amazon character, Mavina's Battle Hymn. In terms of preciousness, it wasn't inferior to Immortal King's Stone Crusher. Could it be that I have been acting low-key recently and accumulated enough luck? Damn, I'm lucky. 2 components of top-tier item sets. As Faye viewed the properties of the Grand Matron Bow, he sighed and commented on his insane luck. Grand Matron Bow was silver, and it was crystal-like, making it look a little dreamy. The bow was thicker than ordinary bows, and vine-like patterns were engraved on it. It allowed the user to have a firmer grip. The 2 ends of the bow were as sharp as blades, and it seemed like they were meant for close-range combat. Also, the bowstring would only appear when the user used it. Otherwise, nothing else would be seen except for the body of the bow. Based on the numbers alone, the arrows this bow shot out would deal a damage between 60 to 307. If a magic archer used it, its damage would be even higher. 3 arrows would be able to kill a low-tier New Moon elite. Of course, the required level, strength, and dexterity were high as well. After Faye observed this bow, he gave it to the Valkyrie beside him. Elena's abilities had increased a ton, and her current bow no longer matched her. It was hindering Elena's combat abilities. Elena fit all the criteria that were required by this bow, and it was a good fit. The Valkyrie nodded and took over the Grand Matron Bow. After she pulled on the mystic bowstring, she commented, "It is good." Faye felt like crying. He thought, this is the top-tier weapon for archers in Diablo world. Why did Elena only say that it is good? Why do I feel like smashing my head against a wall? Fortunately, Faye was now used to Elena's calmness, and he quickly got over it. Faye then summarized the other benefits and rewards he got. After passing the second map, Lutgolian, Faye was now a Nightmare Mode level 56 Barbarian, and he accumulated almost 30 attribute points and more than a dozen skill points. Since he got Immortal King Stone Crusher, and his battle style was going to change, he put all the skill points into Mace Mastery and Polearm Mastery, and the attribute points were added to Strength. After Elena finished distributing her points, today's time limit hadn't arrived yet. Although Faye wanted to go into the next map to test out Immortal King Stone Crusher, he held back his thirst and brought the Valkyrie back to Rogue Encampment in normal mode. "Come on, Elena, stand there. Don't move. I have something to show you," Faye said mysteriously. Elena was a little confused, but she listened to Faye and stood at an empty space in the center of the camp. For some reason, her good friends who would usually be practicing their archery skills weren't there, and the loud metal colliding noises that should be coming from Charcy's workshop was nowhere to be heard. It felt like no one else was in the camp except for herself and Faye. After seeing Faye standing close to her and staring at her with a gentle and loving expression, Elena felt a little shy, and she lightly lowered her head. "Ha ha ha, huh? My icy goddess is finally shy for once." Faye laughed as if he discovered a new continent, and he snapped his finger. "Tud!" After a crisp sound, fire suddenly appeared on the ground. As Elena looked at the fire in surprise, the fire started to travel on the grass field and quickly drew out a heart shape around the two of them. Bam! 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 Then, more than a dozen lights of various bright colors flew into the sky and exploded. The lights painted flowers in the sky, and it was a beautiful fireworks show. The green stems and leaves, the colorful petals, the fireworks made the dark and gloomy sky in Diablo World look gorgeous and fancy. These flames were the products of magic, so they worked a lot better. The colors were more vibrant, and they stayed in the sky much longer. In fact, it felt like they were permanently sealed into the sky. The bright lights in the sky illuminated Elena's face, and she looked even more beautiful, enough to move the gods in heaven. As Faye looked at this icy beauty who experienced a lot of things with him, he got emotional as well. Faye suddenly thought back to when they both almost died under the arrows of skeleton archers in Tristram, and when Elena cried helplessly after seeing the corpses of some of her friends in the tunnel before fighting an Ariel in Catacombs. Although these things only happened about half a year ago, Faye felt like it had been centuries. Right now, both Faye and Elena were powerful enough to clear those levels in the normal mode easily. They grew and became better versions of themselves. At this moment, Faye was going to ask this beautiful girl to marry him. Even though they were meant to be, Faye got a little nervous for some reason. As a rare and cute expression appeared on Elena's face, Faye took out a bunch of fresh red roses, and the fragrance instantly dispersed into the area. The king single-kneeled in front of Elena, raised his head, and said with the most earnest expression on his face, "Elena, please marry this handsome, cute, and sincere young man in front of you." The Valkyrie's grip on the Grand Matron bow loosened, but she then instantly tightened it habitually. As she was at a loss for words, cheers sounded behind the empty tents. The young and pretty female rogues ran out, and everyone else in the camp walked out and showed themselves, such as Charcy the blacksmith, Gede the merchant, and Wariv the caravan leader. They all surrounded Faye and Elena. "Sis, what are you waiting for?" A small yet playful female rogue named Maria winked at Elena and said, "Accept it." "Hee hee, Elena, I'm so envious of you." "No, don't accept yet. We need gifts. 10,000 magic gems. A set of Mavinares items. Hee hee, of course. Also a queen's crown." "Yeah. Elena, you are the flower of rogue. The supreme leader shouldn't be able to get you this easily." "Yeah, let's inspect him a little. Isn't this the trend going on at Chambord right now?" "Oh, right. I heard that in the other world, if a man wants to ask a woman to marry him, he needs a diamond ring. I have a ring here. It is 100% gold, and an ancient master forged it. After 10,000 years passed by, there is only this one ring left. It is invaluable. Look at the color, the style, and the engravings. Also, it is empowered by magic arrays. What do you think, Faye? In this situation, you should buy it and gift it to your lover. As since you are the supreme leader, I will give you a 60% discount. 100,000 gold coins. What do you think? The sly Geed took out a rusted ring that lost its magic power out of nowhere, and he handed it to Faye with a bright smile on his face. Tears appeared in the king's eyes. These girls used to be so pure and nice. Why are they all like this after staying at Chambord for a while? He thought. Regarding Geed, Faye raised his leg and kicked him out of the crowd. Okay. After the initial surprise, the Valkyrie calmed down. She lightly took the flowers Faye handed to her, and she nodded. There was only one word as the response, and it felt like it was an easy decision. However, this response fit her style. Even though Elena acted calm, Faye still saw that the roses in her hands were getting crushed. She was actually so nervous that she didn't notice how much force she was putting on the flowers. Ah! You went too easy on him. Elena's good friends all booed at her easy surrender. Ah, it is so boring. I told you guys. A silly girl like Elena would instantly say yes to Faye's proposal. There is no difficulty at all, and it will only waste time. If I believed in myself more, I would be researching the third magic engraving in the godly rune right now. Cain shook his head as if he knew this was going to happen. I finally know why you are this old but still a virgin, Akira stated calmly. Eh? Why? Cain also spat out a mouthful of blood. First of all, your look. In Faye's words, your look is very creative and brave. However, that isn't the key. The primary reason is that you are not interesting and don't understand love. Akira was very critical and vicious. Puff! Cain instantly felt very depressed. Faye, on the other hand, grabbed onto Elena's cold hand. He had been preparing for this for a while, and he wanted to give Elena a big surprise. However, the Valkyrie's calm and collected reply disappointed Faye a little. However, on another thought, Elena was always like this. Faye should be happy that he caught her rare moment of surprise. Elena was just like that. She didn't even ask him questions such as, "What about Angela?" Her simple answer, "Okay," showed her trust in Faye. That one word showed more determination and faith than anything else. When Faye heard that response, he also sensed the firmness in this pure and beautiful Valkyrie's decision. When Faye exited Diablo World, he felt an unprecedented excitement and was somewhat relaxed. Faye put a lot of effort into this proposal. It was a lot more planned out, and it was a way for Faye to compensate her. After all, Elena had a tougher upbringing, and she had accompanied Faye through all kinds of dangerous situations. In a sense, she offered and risked a lot more. Anyone who was in a good mood felt wonderful. Therefore, Faye had the best sleep he ever had since he came to this world. He even woke up late. It never happened before. When he yawned and walked out of the tent, the sun was already high up in the sky. The troop of Chambord was delayed and behind schedule. At noon, the troop finally entered the territory of Chambord. Technically, the new territory of Chambord. Due to Faye's excellent performance during the affiliated kingdom competition at St. Petersburg, Chambord jumped from a level 6 affiliated kingdom to a level 1 affiliated kingdom. All the small affiliated kingdoms such as the Blackstone Kingdom, the Chishui Kingdom, and the Lacey Kingdom were all given to Chambord as the reward. Therefore, Chambord's territory increased by more than 5 folds. Currently, the troop was at the former Blackstone Kingdom's territory. Kingdom expansion was something that all affiliated kingdoms wanted to see. However, the issue of management of the large territory gave the ministers and leaders of Chambord headaches. The kingdom suddenly got so much land and so many citizens. There weren't enough human resources to manage all of this. Faye's father-in-law, Bast, and the military leader, Brooke, had sent multiple letters to Faye to report this issue, but Faye's response was shameless. Since he was used to being worry-free, he told them to do whatever they felt appropriate. Therefore, he wasn't sure if the two of them solved this issue or not. Although Faye liked being worry-free, he wasn't an irresponsible king. He wanted to have the most realistic view of his kingdom, so the troops slowed down when it entered Chambord's territory, giving Faye the opportunity to observe everything. What pleased Faye was that nothing chaotic took place on the way. Before sunset, the troop came to the outskirts of a town. This town, named Kaluan, was an ordinary farmer's town. This town was a part of the old Level 4 Blackstone Kingdom. 3 months ago, the king of Chambord showed his power at St. Petersburg and earned his name, and the Blackstone Kingdom underperformed. Therefore, the royal family of Blackstone Kingdom got its title stripped away, and the entire kingdom got rewarded to Chambord. Thus, this Kaluan town naturally became a part of Chambord. The ordinary farmers whose families had been living here for ages didn't care too much about which kingdom owned this town. After all, they were struggling to survive. Rather than worrying about who ruled over the town, they were more concerned over if they could get grain seeds in the spring, if they could successfully rent land from the landlord, and if they could pay less taxes. Those things affected their lives way more. It was about 7 p.m., and the sun had set. Clouds of mist started to envelop the town, and the sounds made by dogs and chickens resonated in the area. The farmers who were worried about planting the seeds in the spring gathered in the only pub in the town. They sat down in groups as they waited for the only noble in the town to announce the newest information on the taxes and land rentals. This pub had been around for a while and it wasn't kept too well. However, it was the only place of entertainment in the town, and it was sometimes used as a temporary meeting room. The wooden gate of the pub squeaked continuously as it was being opened and closed repeatedly. More and more dark-skinned and thin men walked into the pub. They were wearing coarse clothes and worn-out black boots, and they had bitter expressions on their faces. They greeted their friends and sat down at the available spots. The only nobleman in the town, Mr. Babel, told everyone that he was going to tell them the seed distribution plan for the upcoming spring and the new taxation system. Therefore, the man in each of the families gathered here and waited for Mr. Babel. Their expressions were bitter because they knew that Mr. Babel was going to use this opportunity to get as much money from them as possible. Squeak! The ragged wooden gate was pushed open, and the person who walked in was a blond, guard-looking young man. He looked fresh, and he was holding a strangely shaped bow. Behind him, there was a long black-haired, handsome young man and a long black-haired, beautiful girl. Their appearances instantly attracted everyone's attention. These good-looking people didn't belong to this Kaluan town. It was clear that they were from another place. Although this town was remote, merchant caravans and mercenary groups passed by frequently. Therefore, it wasn't unusual to see strangers. However, these 3 people were too good-looking, and the people in the pub were all stunned. Behind these 3 people, there was a short brown-haired young man and a short white-haired knight. These 5 people looked around and found a spot by the right-side window to sit down. After a moment of silence, the pub got noisy again. The alcohol could make these farmers forget about their worries temporarily. Even though they were concerned about the news that Mr. Babel might bring them, and they only had a few copper coins in their pockets, they didn't mind drinking 1 pint of beer to relax. The only waitress, Jenny, and the fat female owner of the pub walked around and served these people with the low-quality ale. As these 2 average-looking women with fat butts were walking around, a man reached out and lightly squeezed Jenny's butt, and this chubby girl with freckles on her face screamed exaggeratedly, causing everyone to laugh. This was a standard pub in a farmer's town, and this was a typical day here. Some people couldn't hold back their curiosity and peeked at the 5 strangers. Of course, they wanted to see the beautiful and pure girl who came with them. This girl was so gorgeous that she looked like a goddess, and these men who are in their 40s and 50s would blush when peeking at her. Her beauty was beyond their imagination, and they didn't even dare to have any dirty thoughts when looking at her. Compared with her, the wife of Mr. Babel, who was the dream woman for a lot of the men in this town, looked ugly as ever. People were chatting among themselves and wondering about these 5 people's statuses, but they didn't dare to walk up and strike a conversation. Interesting. I like this atmosphere. Faye sat down beside the window and looked out to the nightly sky where stars shone. The slight, chaotic atmosphere reminded him of his previous life. When he was in university after playing games in the internet cafe, he and his friends would go to some roadside barbecue restaurants at 12 in the midnight to chill. For some reason, Faye felt like he was becoming more and more nostalgic. Perhaps it was because he was gradually becoming a part of this world, and his memory from his previous life was fading away. He instinctively wanted to keep some. Angela had never been in such an environment before. However, she didn't hate it. The two things that were repelling her was the thick smell of the tobacco and the stinky feet. She leaned against Faye tighter, and she winked her noise instinctively. Her charm was undeniable. Her subconscious movement instantly made the men sitting close to them put out their cigarettes and put their feet back into their old boots. Torres sat to the left of Faye. He sat a little further behind, and he observed everyone in the pub, judging if they were dangerous or not. Even the thin, poor prostitutes who only had a few pieces of clothes on and were trying to get customers were inspected. Even though Torres knew that the king was mighty, and probably no one in this town could threaten him. However, as a guard, his instinct and habit made him highly aware. Jesse and Alan were sitting on the opposite side of the table. Jesse was born in a poor neighborhood, and his life in Blackcloth Shrine was simple and ascetic. Therefore, he got used to this little pub really quick. He saw there quietly and even called over the chubby waitress Jenny to order a plate of salt water-boiled beans, a pint of bitter ale, and a few pieces of local whole wheat bread. Bam! At this moment, the wooden door of the pub was kicked open. Everyone turned their heads and saw an arrogant figure. He was more than 2 meters tall, bald, and wearing 2 metal bracelets. After he glanced around viciously, a proud smile on his face. It was clear that he was pleased with the fact that everyone in the pub stopped talking when he made his appearance. Then, he turned around and put on a flattering smile, bending his back and making a respectful gesture. Then, a thin, pale, mid-aged man walked in. He was wearing a fancy robe. Beside him, there was a mid-aged woman who was hanging onto his arms. This woman was wearing a ton of makeup. She wasn't bad-looking and had a voluptuous body, but her age made her look a little bloated. Also, she was wearing a ton of jewelry. Even though it was fancy, it felt a little vulgar. As soon as these two people stepped into the pub, a disgusted look appeared on their face. They both took out a white cloth to cover their noses, clearing displeased with the air quality there. This thin, pale, mid-aged man was Mr. Babel, the ruler of the town and the only noble around. He could determine the fate of every person in the town. He was a little noble in the former Blackstone Kingdom, and his title got kept after the kingdom was rewarded to Chambord. The woman beside him was his wife, Kelly, and the vicious bald man was his guard, Derek. I'm sure you all know the reason why you are here. The spring is about to arrive, so according to the tradition of our town, we will distribute the land rental agreement tomorrow and sale the seeds as well. As you know, the entire Blackstone Kingdom is rewarded to King Alexander, His Majesty of Chambord. Therefore, the previous rules are changing. After he slowly walked into the table at the center of the pub, which looked the cleanest, waitress Jenny quickly rushed over and cleaned this table even more. Then the lady, Kelly, pinched her nose and sat down. However, Mr. Babel continued to stand. In a calm yet determinate tone, he looked around and announced, according to the new laws created by King Alexander His Majesty, the tax is going to increase for the coming year. There is the seed tax, justice tax, and the war tax. Each tax is 1 silver coin and will be based on head counts. Before Babel could finish, the people in the hub started to shout, God! 3 more taxes? Can we still live? 1 silver coin per tax per person? After working hard for a full year, I can only make 5 to 6 silver coins. That isn't enough for the taxes. What should we eat? What can we wear then? Damn! King Alexander of Chambord. Is he trying to kill us? Damn! We can't live anymore. Justice tax? War tax? There is no justice. There are no wars around here. We wouldn't be able to afford food, but we need to pay for wars. Just let the enemies of Jax come here. By then, we might be able to have some money left over for food. Tyrant Alexander. I hate you. Although these farmers were used to being disappointed once every year and knew that the nobles wouldn't stop getting wealth from them, the new taxes placed a heavy burden on their minds, and they couldn't hold back their anger. Instantly, the pub got chaotic, and the farmers were enraged. When Angela and others looked at him with surprise, Faye shrugged and said, Don't look at me. I never gave such order. I don't think Uncle Bast and Brooke would do something like this. Quiet down. Quiet. Mr. Babel knocked the table forcefully. That tough, bald guard looked around viciously, and his knuckles made a series of popping noises. Then he smashed his fist against a wooden beam, causing the dust on the ceiling to fall off. His ferocious presence instantly scared the farmers, making them very quiet. They had no power and influence. Except for getting angry, they couldn't do anything else. You need to know that King Alexander His Majesty is fighting with the enemies of Jax in the front line. He is protecting the empire. We need to contribute as much as we can. If the military doesn't get enough funds, the empire might get conquered. The Sand Ghost's blades aren't easy to talk to. They will kill all the men and assault all women. This town would be turned into a living hell. Therefore, you need to pay the taxes. Babel paused for a second after seeing that his words scared these farmers and extinguished their will for rebellion. He nodded and continued, except for the taxes, the rental cost will increase 3 times. Also, the price for the seeds will increase 3 times as well. You all need to pay up in 10 days. If you can't, you won't get seeds and lands this year. Before he could finish, the pub got noisy again. What? That is impossible. We don't have that much money. How? None of us can. Tyrant. That tyrant. Who is going to come and save us? We would rather be ruled by the royal family of the Blackstone Kingdom. This damn king of Chambord. He doesn't care about our lives. Kick the people of Chambord out. Alexander is a vampire. He is a greedy devil. Chambordians. Get out of Kaluan and the Blackstone Kingdom. The angry people knocked the tables, and some of them even broke the metal cups. The cussing and shouts almost destroyed the roof. The atmosphere in the pub was intense. Anything might trigger an explosion. What Babel said went through the bottom line. If everything was calculated according to what he said, then no one in this town could afford growing crops for the next year. I'm empathic about the situation, but I couldn't do anything. These are the orders from King Alexander of Chambord. No one can go against it. Mr. Babel intentionally threw all the blames onto Chambord, and the angry crowd started to chant things like, Alexander is a devil. Torres instantly stood up and grabbed onto his bow. However, Fay nodded and signaled his guard to sit down. It was clear that the king realized something. At this moment, a young man suddenly stood up and refuted, You are lying. King Alexander His Majesty never gave out such orders. People turned around and looked in the direction of that voice. There was a dark, thin young man who looked quite dirty. He was small and he was wearing cheap clothes. His hair was messy, and straws and dry grasses were in there. His name was Monet, and he was one of the poorest people in the town. Before he said anything, he was standing by the door, not even able to afford a cup of the cheap ale. He was silent and timid before, but for some reason, he suddenly stepped forward and refuted Mr. Babel. Monet, do you know what you are saying? Babel frowned and stared at this young man viciously. I know you are not right. King Alexander His Majesty didn't make those rules. After being questioned by the most powerful person in the town, Monet, who should be timid and back off, didn't do so. Even though he understood the underlying meaning in Babel's question, he thought of that person and straightened his back, speaking his mind. Really? Are you sure, Monet? How do you know? What is going on? Monet, who told you that? What else do you know? The farmers in the pub grasped onto what Monet said as if they were drowning and grabbed onto a straw. They started to ask questions, and a few more anxious ones instantly surrounded Monet. Although they knew that this young man who was usually not that hard-working could be lying, they still hoped that he was telling the truth. Monet, are you doubting me? Doubting the words of a noble? Do you know what that means? Babel frowned so much that his eyebrows were almost connected. Everyone in this town knew that this nobleman was really mad. After seeing this expression, that bald guard sneered and walked toward Monet. Monet had a friend beside him who lightly pulled his sleeve, trying to tell him to apologize and beg for forgiveness. However, this usually timid young man had a stubborn expression on his face. He straightened his back and stated, You are lying. I met the envoy from Chambord, and she said that King Alexander His Majesty removed all taxes for farmers, and the land rental is also going to be free. Lastly, the seeds will be distributed at no cost as well. What? There are such things. Envoy from Chambord? Where? Why didn't I see anyone? Are you sure you met the envoy from Chambord? Monet? The farmers in the pub screamed. The information Monet told them was no different to the information about a lake in the eyes of travelers in the desert who were dying of thirst. I'm not lying. It is real. Ah, bam. Before Monet could finish, he screamed out in pain. After that bald guard punched Monet to the ground, he gave him another stomp. Monet's body instantly curled up like a cooked shrimp. He was in so much pain that his face paled, and he couldn't make a sound. The farmers in the pub were terrified, and no one dared to go up and help Monet to stand up. This bald guard was almost a one-star warrior and practically obtained warrior energy. He could easily defeat everyone in the pub. Due to his existence, no one in the town dared to doubt Mr. Babble's orders. Yuck! You dirty pig! How dare you lie and throw dirt on me? How dare you doubt the words of Mr. Babble? The bald guard spat on the ground, and he sneered even more. As he glanced around, he laughed. You low lives! This is the consequences of doubting Mr. Babble. Tie him up. When the sun appears in the sky tomorrow, hang him in the center of the town. Let everyone know that death will be given to anyone who dares to disobey King Alexander His Majesty. Babble relaxed and looked at Monet as if he was a nasty bug. It felt like this nobleman didn't even want to stomp on this poor young man because his shoes might get dirty, but his words were chilling. Sitting close to the window, Faye stopped Torres and Jessie from helping again. When Monet was knocked to the ground, the king saw that Monet's friend who tried to stop him from speaking escaped from the pub. It was clear that he was planning to find a person. If Faye wasn't wrong, the person should be the envoy from Chambord. Nobleman Babble was vicious and continued to throw all the blame onto the king of Chambord. And Faye was almost sure that all the increased taxes and expenses were tricks played by this man. If the king showed his identity right now, he could solve the issues instantly. However, he was interested in this envoy Monet talked about, so he wanted to see how this envoy was going to deal with this problem. Inside the pub, poor Monet was tied to the wooden beam in the center of the pub, and a ragged cloth stuffed his mouth. He was now half unconscious. After Babble threatened the farmers a bit more, no one dared to go against him. The noble lady named Kelly was covering her nose with a white handkerchief that had a faint fragrance on it, and she was bored and looking around. Suddenly, her pupil contracted when she saw the 5 strangers. After she showed hostility toward Angela, who was a lot more beautiful than her, she focused on Faye, Torres, and Jessie, who were all good-looking. A thirsty woman. Faye observed her already. He had seen a lot of Japanese adult videos, so he understood the intention of this mid-aged woman who had heavy makeup on and felt good about herself. Perhaps Faye was the king and had a special aura around him. Kelly's eyes locked onto him. With the sixth sense of a woman, she instantly ranked these 3 handsome young men in order. At this time, Babble finally turned around, followed his wife's gaze, and saw the 5 strangers. As a man, his eyes instantly focused on Angela. A strong sense of possessiveness appeared in his mind. As he was about to do something, he suddenly froze. He rubbed his eyes and got confused. At that moment, for some reason, his vision blurred. When he looked at the 5 strangers, he could only make out the rough outer shapes. When he focused back onto the goddess-like girl, he couldn't see her face clearly anymore. He could only see the dark edges. However, when he turned around and looked at other people, his eyes went back to normal. Faye curled his lips. He was using his power to disturb others' visions. If he didn't want to wait for the envoy from Chambord to show up, he could have waved his finger and eliminated this vicious and greedy little nobleman. Babble lowered his head and whispered something into the bald guard's ear. Then this guard turned to look at Faye's group and nodded flatteringly. As this guard was about to walk over to Faye, the wooden door of the pub squeaked open. The sharp noise sounded ear-piercing in this now quiet pub. Please, please. Monet got beat by them. He couldn't hold it any longer. An anxious voice sounded. and the people in the pub heard it alongside the noises made by the wind. Everyone in the pub looked at the door. A figure that was about 1.6 meters tall appeared. This person was wearing a long red robe and a golden belt. The youthful body seemed pressing, and the red fire-like hair was fluttering in the wind. Together with the robe, it made this person look like a cloud of burning flame. It was a woman. To be exact, she was a girl who looked about 15 to 16 years old. Besides this girl, there were 3 young men. 2 of them were wearing black armors and looked like they were 16 to 17 years old, and the third person was the young man who was with Monet and escaped not too long ago. The girl in the red robe ignored everyone's surprise. With her head raised, she looked around and locked her eyes onto Babel. She sneered and asked haughtily, "Are you the little noble who dared to lie and defame King Alexander His Majesty?" Such a domineering tone. This girl completely ignored Babel's title. "Who are you?" Babel frowned and asked. His thick eyebrows furrowed and were almost connecting. "I'm the envoy from Chambord, a second-year student in Chambord Civil and Military University. Also, I'm a tri-merit student and a student official in the university. Remember my name. I'm Louise." The girl in red responded proudly and told everyone a bunch of obscure titles. Puff! Faye almost spat out the ale he was drinking. He finally recognized who this girl was. He didn't expect that the envoy from Chambord would be her. Faye and Angela looked at each other and saw the smile on each other's face. They all knew this fire-like and bright girl. In fact, she was treasured by almost everyone in Chambord's military. "Are you King Alexander? If you can save my father, I'm willing to be your lover forever." This was the first thing that Louise said to Faye when they met. Back then, Faye merely discovered the existence of Diablo World, and he just started experimenting with this golden finger. During that time, Chambord Castle was under siege, and the black-armored enemies surrounded it. In order to destroy the siege ladders in battle, Pierce risked his life and got severely injured, dancing on the verge of death. When Faye successfully got a bottle of minor health potion from Diablo World, and before he saved Pierce, he encountered Pierce's daughter, who was this red-haired Louise. Back then, Louise was still little. She was just a little over 10 years old. Now, the time only passed by for about a year, and that girl, who cried beside her injured father, looked like she was 6 to 7 years older. Her thin and weak body had grown a lot, and she looked more like a young woman now. Her hip and chest bulged up, filling up the loose red magic robe. However, her facial features were delicate but a little immature. Therefore, the contrast between the cuteness and semi-mature body made her the perfect lowly. No wonder when she walked in, almost everyone felt like this fire-like girl stole all their attention. Faye didn't expect that Bast and Brooke would be comfortable enough to send the students of Chambord Civil and Military University to inspect the new territory of Chambord. The 2 young men behind Louise were also wearing the uniforms of Chambord Civil and Military University, so they must be students as well. What pleased Faye was that this university he established less than a year ago when he felt like joking actually worked pretty well. At the moment, Louise was already a 2-star mage, and a faint cloud of fire elements was floating around her. The other 2 students looked thin, but Faye could tell that they had warrior energies flowing inside their bodies. They were both 1-star warriors. The 3 of them were invincible in this small town. They could deal with the current situation easily. Therefore, Faye lightly squeezed Angela's hand and started to observe the performance of Chambord students. He wanted to know how these 3 people were going to solve the current problem. "You are the envoy from Chambord?" Babel's brows twisted frequently like poisonous snakes, causing his expression to change continuously. This little nobleman felt like something was wrong. When he turned his head and looked at his bald guard, he saw that his guard wasn't afraid. Therefore, he calmed down and mocked. "Do you have any proof? Little girl, can you prove your identity? We knew that shameless people like you would say something like this. Therefore, the head minister of Chambord, Mr. Bast, give us these scrolls. I will show this one scroll to people like you who are trying to defame King Alexander His Majesty so that you will finally surrender." "Humph." Louise sneered and took out a red scroll that had golden edges from her inner pocket. She lightly flicked her wrist, and the scroll opened. Then, a surge of energy appeared when the vivid image of a two-headed dog with an axe and a blade in its mouth got displayed. The image was created by magic energy, and it was bright and eye-catching. It was the symbol of Shambord. This was the scroll of the king's order, and these scrolls were created by powerful mages, contained anti-forging seals, and were extremely hard to copy. An ordinary level 1 affiliated kingdom shouldn't have the power to create such scrolls. 3 months ago, it was announced that these scrolls would represent the will of King Alexander His Majesty. Therefore, the farmers in the hub all stood up in excitement as they stared at the bright image on the scroll. At this moment, almost everyone believed Louise's identity. Babel's expression froze as well. Ha ha ha! What a joke! Babel's wife, Kelly, who had been silent, suddenly laughed. Little girl, you want to show off a scroll that you stole from somewhere? What a silly girl. Everyone, just think about it. How could King Alexander His Majesty, someone who is talented and wise, send a little girl as his envoy? Also, from your looks, you guys aren't even adults yet. How could His Majesty trust kids like you? This is ridiculous. Little girl, lying about your identity as the envoy of the king could potentially result in you guys being hung. One had to admit that women's sixth sense was sharp. This chubby, mid-aged woman instantly saw through Louise's real age and grabbed onto this loophole in the argument. After hearing Kelly's words, the farmers who believed Louise started to doubt her. Ha ha ha! I almost got fooled by you. Little girl, you sure are daring. How dare you steal one of Shambord's scrolls of the king's order and try to fool the people of Kaluan? Tell me who told you to do this. Monet is your co-conspirator, right? Hehe, the real envoy from Shambord is resting in my mansion, and he has been worrying since his scroll of the king's order was stolen. Come here. Guards. Arrest this scammer and her peers. Lock them up and interrogate them. I need to know all of the participants in this scheme. Kelly's words reminded Babel, so he opened his mouth and instantly threw dirt on Louise and her peers habitually. Using words along, he turned them into thieves who stole this precious and powerful scroll. A series of footsteps sounded. More than a dozen guards rushed into the pub from the outside with weapons in their hands. As vicious smiles appeared on their faces, they surrounded Louise and her peers. The farmers in the pub were terrified as they moved further away so that they wouldn't be affected. The young man who brought Louise and the other 2 students of the university here fell onto the ground, and his face paled. Humph! I knew that you would try the last-ditch effort. Louise sneered. She shook her hands and carefully put away the scroll as if it was the most precious treasure. Then, she pointed at Babel in the nose and stated loudly and aggressively, I took out the scroll of the king's order to show you that I have it, and it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Nobleman Babel of the Kaluan town, I, the envoy from Shambord, suspect that you are trying to cooperate with the enemies of Jax and defame King Alexander His Majesty. You also disobeyed the orders from the king, acted dishonestly, and plotted conspiracies. You better give up and wait for the ruling of the kingdom's court. If you dare to resist arrest, as the envoy from Shambord, I have the right of killing treasonous suspects on the spot. Louise was tougher than both Babel and Kelly. She opened her mouth and made Babel into someone who committed treason. Her determination and courage stunned Jesse and Alan. These 2 men turned around and looked at Faye, thinking, no wonder she is the envoy from Shambord. Her domineering and straightforward behaviors are almost identical to King Alexander. What? How dare you? Do you want to die? Babel shouted furiously. Quickly arrest these 3 scammers. Quick! The guards sneered and stepped forward. As the people worried about this fire-like girl, they heard a series of crisp, wind chime-like chants. Louise placed her hands in front of her chest, and waves of flames appeared in between her palms, instantly increasing the temperature in the pub. Then, more than a dozen dashes of flames shot out and struck every single guard. Bam! Bam! As if they were electrocuted, these guards fell onto the ground while their bodies turned black. Their hairs were burned, and streaks of black smokes came out of their mouths. They couldn't even hold onto their weapons since all of them fell unconscious. Ma! Mage? This girl is a powerful mage. Babel and Kelly were stunned. They realized that the situation went out of their control, and they sensed a chill going up their spines. At the same time, cold sweats covered their foreheads. Don't worry, Mr. Babel. Hee, she only knows a few magic spells. How dare she try to fool us? Let me defeat her, the bald guard said arrogantly. Usually, he was feared in the town. Therefore, he completely forgot about his real capabilities. He thought that he could deal with more than a dozen farmers at once, so he must be able to fight with this female mage. As long as I'm careful and not hit by that little fire, I should be fine. Isn't it known that mages couldn't fight in a close range? I will only need to get close to her, he thought. Tap, tap, tap. As he quickened his steps, this guard started to move around and change his positions like an agile bear while moving toward Louise. After all, he had obtained warrior energy. Although he wasn't an official one-star warrior, he could execute these moves easily. On the other hand, it seemed like that girl couldn't react in time. She didn't even chant her spell. Just as hope restored in Babel and Kelly's minds, a sneer sounded. One of the young men who were standing beside Louise moved. He instantly dashed forward and kicked out with a light blue energy around his feet. Before the bald guard could dodge, he was kicked in the chin. A blue-whitish energy instantly spread to his body from his chin. In just a few seconds, a dense layer of frost enveloped his body, and he was completely frozen by the ice elemental warrior energy. Only his eyes could barely move around, emitting a terrified light. You aren't even a one-star warrior. How dare you speak to the number one goddess of our civil and military university like that? To be honest, I'm quite envious of your bravery. Bald guy. This young man landed on the ground and patted his hands. His tone was filled with mockery. Haha, Pato, don't praise me like that. I'm shy. King Alexander, His Majesty, had said that tiny ants dared to climb over a holy dragon not because they are dumb. It is because that they are ignorant. Therefore, I will forgive this ignorant bear. Louise referred to herself as a holy dragon without even being shy as a teasing smile appeared on her face. Her smooth hand played with one strand of her red hair, and she lightly walked to the bald guard who was frozen. As this guard got terrified, she pointed out her middle finger and lightly pressed on this man's chest, as if she was an adult who was disciplining a misbehaving child. Bam! The bald guard fell back to the ground like a piece of wood. All the farmers in the pub gasped. This girl and her peers' strengths were beyond the imagination of these farmers. They didn't expect that the strongest person in the town, who was this bald guard, got easily defeated. He didn't even get to touch the clothes of his opponents. How could they be so powerful when they are so young? At this moment, most of the people in the pub believed that these three kids were envoys from Chambord. Only the envoys from Chambord could be this mighty. Huh? That Mr. Babel, weren't you quite imposing a moment ago? What? You want to escape now? Louise turned her head and looked at Babel and Kelly, who were trying to escape when people weren't paying attention to them. You? Babel froze after his intention was discovered. He turned around and tried to smile, but that smile was uglier than a crying face. He lost all of his pride, and he stuttered, Envoy. This must be a misunderstand. I was fooled by someone? Haha. You can tell that to Uncle Oleg when you are at the Justice Department of Chambord? Oh, just a friendly reminder, Uncle Oleg is known to be the man who could even make a stone cry out in pain. He is coming back to Chambord with King Alexander, His Majesty. If you are lucky, you will get to be interrogated by him personally. Louise's prankster smile and tone along with what she said almost caused Babel and Kelly to faint. No, oh no. Ms. Envoy, please listen to us. We were fooled by a fake envoy. Kelly rolled her eyes and tried to prove their innocence. Shut up. You are a vicious woman. Louise, who was smiling, suddenly changed her expression, and she looked cold as ice. She scolded. Do you think the envoys from Chambord are idiots? We showed up late because we were investigating into some serious matters. Humph. We have collected evidence against you too. We have information on all the crimes you committed and this conspiracy you two had with 4 other people, trying to stir up the farmers to cause a riot. Brand, arrest them. Her sharp words instantly destroyed Babel and his wife. Then, the young man who didn't move before dashed forward and took out a pair of delicate handcuffs, locking these 2 people together. On the other hand, the young man who used ice elemental warrior energy untied Monet from the wooden beam in the center of the pub. Then, he used his warrior energy and healed the injuries this young man had suffered. Okay, the criminals who tried to defame King Alexander, His Majesty, have been arrested. Now, as the envoy from Chambord, I will announce His Majesty's orders. Starting this spring, all farmlands are free to rent. Tomorrow, we will distribute the free seeds in front of this Mr. Babel's mansion. Louise jumped onto a table playfully and told the farmers about the real situation. Cheers instantly sounded within the pub. Hail the king! Long live King Alexander! May gods bless His Majesty, the generous and just King Alexander. We praise you and will pray for you. All the cussing and swearing turned into cheering and praising, and Faye turned from a tyrant into a great and noble lord. Louise and her 2 peers were taken by this scene, and these 3, who looked like young adults but were really kids, finally showed the childish side of their personalities. They laughed and jumped. Excitement and admiration would appear on their faces every time they chanted, "Hail the King." The farmers slowly left the pub and went back home. On the way, they were still chanting, "Hail the King." Soon, not a lot of people were still inside the pub. Except for the female owner and waitress Jenny, who were always in the pub. There were Babel, his wife Kelly, their guards Louise, Pato, Brand, Monet, and Faye's group of 5 people. Huh? Friends, you all seem unfamiliar. Do you live in this town? Louise turned around and asked with a serious expression on her face. Out of the 5 people who were sitting by the window, she could only see the faces of 2 people. They were a brown short-haired young man and a white short-haired young man. Didn't matter how hard she tried. She couldn't see the faces of the other 3. She would barely make out the outer edges of their faces. She couldn't detect the power of this group of people. She shouldn't try to talk to masters like them. However, since a lot of strange masters came into Chambord's new territories and tried to cause trouble, Louise wanted to see if this group of people were friendly or not. She planned ahead of time, and she already figured out that these 5 people came this afternoon by asking townsfolk. Why, little girl? Are you trying to figure out our identities? This voice brought along an indescribable pressure, bringing fear to Louise, Pato, and Brand's minds. They felt like they had been seen through, and their bodies shivered. They instantly unleashed all their energies, preparing for the unknown. Such power! Louise, Pato, and Brand all got concerned. This mysterious person only said 1 sentence, and we already sensed so much pressure. His strength is far beyond the instructors and teachers at Chambord's Civil and Military University. They thought, why is there such a powerful master in this little town? The 3 of them were shocked. They received the best and most scientific training, and they were much better than that bald guard who didn't know anything. Louise still had a bright smile on her beautiful face, but she made a hand gesture behind her back. Pato and Brand instantly understood their leader's intent and quietly adjusted their positions. The 3 of them were able to coordinate very well, and they were all calculating the best possible escape path that they could take if the situation got too dangerous. They knew how to do this since it was one of the mandatory courses in Chambord's Civil and Military University. I'm an envoy from Chambord. Therefore, after encountering strangers, it is my duty to ask for more information. Louise raised her head and replied sincerely after she felt ready. Before she could finish, an insane amount of pressure crushed down toward her. It felt like a gigantic mountain was falling from the sky. You? Louise and the 2 boys were shocked. They didn't expect this mysterious man to attack them instantly. Also, as this mysterious person attacked, he blocked off all the exits in the pub. It felt like this man saw through their thoughts and instantly obliterated their plans. Now, these 3 kids had to use all that they got. As Louise quickly backed off, she reached out her hand and took out a scroll from her storage ring. It was the scroll of the king's order. The scroll rolled open in the wind. As Louise started to chant a spell, a mystic sensation appeared in the pub. At the same time, both Pato and Bran charged forward. They drew their swords, dashed forward on both sides of Louise, and came back together, shoulder to shoulder. As their wood elemental and ice elemental warrior energies combined, the warrior energy flames brightened as the two elements complemented each other. Together, they tried to stop or at least slow down the pressure that was coming at them. Greenwood sword strike. White snow floating chop. As they shouted, they used their most powerful techniques. These two combat techniques were created by the most powerful person in Chambord, King Alexander, and they were designed specifically for the students in the civil and military university. Although they were basic and had strange names, after the students learned the fundamentals from the mysterious instructors, these simple techniques were extremely effective. The practitioners could deal 200% the damage. Bam! Bam! However, before they could fully use the techniques, that pressure got to them. Like two pieces of paper in front of wild wind, they were blown into the air. They couldn't even stop that pressure for 1 second. Appear. King Alexander's protection. Fortunately, Louise broke the record for the amount of time it took to activate the scroll. She instantly completed the spell. As she shouted, dashes of flames shot out of the scroll of the king's order. The two-headed dog jumped out of the scroll, roared, and turned into a black energy shield. At the same time, Louise didn't hesitate and cast several spells on herself, such as floating spell, light body spell, agility spell, and strength spell. Then, she turned into a dash of red lightning, grabbed Pato and Brand, who were knocked away and almost fainted, and tried to escape. Her timing, movements, choice of escape path were clear and top-rated. Bam! The huge black shield only lasted 3 seconds. Crack! This crackling noise wasn't loud, but it shocked these 3 kids. They knew that the scrolls of the king's order were magic scrolls created by King Alexander His Majesty. They could be used as identification token as well as powerful weapons, since several defensive and offensive magic spells were stored in them. This spell, called King Alexander's Protection, would create a powerful energy shield, and it was capable of blocking the full-on strikes of a low-tier New Moon elite. It isn't able to block this person? Is he a master beyond the realm of low-tier New Moon? With Pato and Brand in her hands, Louise sprinted forward without daring enough to look back. She instantly broke open the gate and dashed out of the pub. Each of her steps covered a distance of at least 4 meters. Ha! We finally made it out. We need to report back to the Chambord city. Such a powerful master appeared in the territory. Louise took a deep breath and was about to charge forward again, but she shivered again. A shocked expression appeared on her face. That mysterious man already appeared in front of them and blocked their way, and she didn't even detect it until now. Too powerful. We couldn't do anything to him, Louise thought. She felt very powerless, but she reacted fast. She swung her arms and threw the 2 boys to the left and right side of her. With a valiant expression on her face, she shouted, "Go! Don't worry about me. You must deliver the news. Tell Mr. Bast and Mr. Brooke to be prepared. There is a powerful master who is hostile toward our kingdom." At this moment, Louise was ready to risk her life and buy time for her peers. She had to make sure that her peers could get the message out. It didn't matter what this mysterious person's background was. Chambord had to be prepared. If this master really tries to attack the Chambord castle, it would be devastating for the kingdom, Louise thought. As this girl was about to activate the second spell that was stored in the scroll, she was stunned again. As if a bolt of lightning was traveling through her body shivered as she rubbed her eyes, trying to make sure that she didn't see illusions. "What? Girl, you said that you are going to be my lover. Why? You don't recognize me anymore?" Faye turned around, revealed his identity, and smiled. "Ah, you are Alexander? It is really you? King Alexander His Majesty." Suddenly seeing the legend in Chambord and the idol of every student in the university, Louise, who was a fast thinker, blushed and couldn't get a full sentence out. Pato, who was rushing back and trying to save Louise, was stunned when he got close. An overly excited expression appeared on his face. Brand, who bent his back and was on the run, heard Louise's gasp and froze. After he made sure that the situation was safe, he rushed back with a similar overly excited expression. However, after a little while, he suddenly thought of something and single-kneeled. With his head lowered and face blushed, he stuttered, "Your Majesty, I'm not afraid of death and wasn't trying to save my own life. When Louise threw the two boys away a second ago, they made different decisions. Pato couldn't ditch his peer and rushed back to fight alongside Louise, but Brand didn't hesitate and decided to dash into the bushes and escape. Now, he was really nervous. He was afraid that the supreme ruler of the kingdom, his idol, would misunderstand his decision. Faye laughed and waved his hand, and a gentle energy helped Brand off the ground. When faced with danger, choosing to escape doesn't mean that you are a coward. Rather, it requires more bravery. Your decision might be misunderstood by others, but it is more valuable than dying alongside your peers. Haha, don't look at me like that. These are all a part of the curriculum in the university, right? I wrote all the textbooks. Brand, I know that you tried to escape because you want to get this message passed to people like Bast, just like what Louise asked you to do. Tears appeared in Brand's eyes. He and Pato had different personalities. Pato was more emotional and short-tempered, but he was more cool-headed and logical. That was why they made different decisions just now. King Alexander, His Majesty, is indeed kind and wise. Also, his strength is also beyond our imaginations. Haha, we got to battle with His Majesty a little. We can show off to our classmates, and they will be so jealous. Pato and Brand thought excitedly. Hee. Alexander is just as smart and powerful as before. Most importantly, he is even more handsome than before. Louise thought to herself like Faye's little fangirl. Ha. Great. Your performances sure surprised me. It looks like the civil and military university sure created a bunch of talents for the kingdom. Faye was happy with what he saw. Although these three kids were different, they were talented in their own ways. At this time, Angela and the others walked out of the pub with smiles on their faces. Angela, Torres. Louise's eyes lit up as she jumped into Angela's arms. She and Angela had a great relationship. Angela always cared for this girl who lost her mother at a young age and had a father who was a little careless. Pato and Brand could only stand on the side nervously and watch enviously. However, they soon got excited since they saw another idol of theirs, Torres, one of the few legendary warriors of Chambord. He started as a weak young man, but he became the most trusted guard of King Alexander, and he got into the top 20 in the competition at St. Petersburg, making a name for himself. Son of Wind, Fernando Torres was one of the most popular names in Chambord's civil and military university. On their way back to the military campsite, the darkness had enveloped the land, and the mountains in the distance and the trees nearby all looked like black beasts. There weren't many stars in the sky. Most of them were blocked by the dark clouds in the sky, making the atmosphere a little gloomy. Because of Louise, who was a playful girl, the journey back to the campsite wasn't dull. She was funny, and the people in the group laughed regularly because of what she said. On the way back, Louise told Angela about the changes that had occurred at Chambord, making everyone want to go back and see. Chambord's troop hid away the flags and kept a low profile. The camp was located beside a river that was 5 kilometers away from the Kaluan town. After inspecting the town, Faye and the other 4 people headed back. Of course, Louise, Pato, and Brand all followed him. As soon as they thought that they could meet the famous warriors of Chambord, who made names for themselves in the competition between the affiliated kingdoms at St. Petersburg, Pato and Brand got really excited and nervous. People like white-haired fast sword Pierce, black-haired vicious fist Drogba, Desperation creator Oleg, and Destructive Finger Check were all now extremely famous at Chambord, and students in the university all wanted to meet them. Therefore, Pato and Brand couldn't even focus on their steps. Unlike Fire Rose Louise, who was Pierce's daughter, and met these top leaders of Chambord earlier on, Pato and Brand were from poor families. Their talents were revealed after the competition among the affiliated kingdoms, and they were enrolled in the civil and military university. Therefore, they had never met these famous warriors before, and that was why they were so excited. Also, like all their peers, these two kids were super loyal and held great admirations for the king. If Faye didn't go against a lot of people's objections and didn't use a lot of the kingdom's resources on creating this public school and funding the poor students, kids like Pato and Brand wouldn't get the opportunity to chase their dreams of becoming mages and warriors. The pressure from survival would crush them. They might not even be able to afford new clothes and good food. It could be said that the king's decision on creating this university changed the fates of numerous poor children and their families. They were able to chase their dreams and become powerful masters. Just from this aspect alone, it was easy to imagine how much admiration and gratitude the kids in the university had toward Faye. Torres could tell that these two kids were nervous, so he smiled and chatted with them, easing their minds. Son of Wind, Torres was a cool-headed god-tier archer who wouldn't even waver in front of powerful enemies. However, he was moved when he saw these two young boys. Not long ago, his fate was just like these two kids. He was from a poor family and had to worry about survival, and it was the king who changed his fate. Therefore, he felt very close to these two kids who were experiencing the same things. Jesse and Alan, who were from the Blackcloth Shrine, kept their silence. What was happening touched their hearts. When they saw these three talented kids and heard the changes that were happening in Chambord from this fun-loving girl named Louise, they were stunned, especially Jesse. To be honest, he had a hard time believing it. How could a savage, battle-hungry, greedy, and aggressive person like the king of Chambord be able to accomplish so much unimaginable things? However, when these three kids glance at this king, that passion, confidence, and admiration, it feels similar to how believers of the Holy Church worship the Pope. After seeing all this, Jesse's mind started to shake. His intuition told him that this girl was probably honest. Looks like Mr. Batistuta is right, and Alan is right as well. My subjective judgment blinded me, and the rules of the church constrained my mind. I wasn't really observant, and I should take this opportunity to see how good of a King Alexander really is, Jesse murmured to himself. Suddenly, Jesse stopped thinking about those matters and paused his steps. He sensed murderous spirits in the area. Then, he realized that the king of Chambord, who was walking in the very front, stopped as well. Faye and Jesse were the two most powerful people in the group. Therefore, they were also the ones who discovered the hidden danger first as well. Then, Torres and Alan sensed that something was wrong and quickly protected Angela from the left and the right. After seeing that, Louise, Pato, and Brand, who were well-trained, also understood what was going on. They quickly protected Angela from the back. The five of them protected the future queen, who was the weakest in the group. Who is it? Get out! Divine sight! Jesse slowly walked out. Since Faye was now the unofficial bishop of the Blackcloth Shrine, his identity was really prestige. Therefore, he shouldn't do everything himself. Thus, as one of the two protectors from the shrine, Jesse had to stand out. Dashes of silver energy flames appeared, and it looked like the divine gods were blessing Jesse. A powerful aura enveloped him, and he looked like a small sun in the night, lighting up everything in the area. Louise and her two peers were stunned. Their eyes opened wide as they thought, "Holy power! This serious-looking young man is from the Holy Church." They had been wondering about Jesse's identity, but they didn't expect that he was a powerful master from the Holy Church. As the silver light radiated, a special energy dispersed into the area. Like sound waves, Jesse easily detected where the people in black were hiding and lit their locations up. Huh? Someone from the Holy Church. A gasp sounded. It felt like a person was asking his peers. Then, 5 people, who were all wearing big cloaks that hid their identities, appeared around the group, surrounding them from all directions. The person standing right in front of them was tall and powerful. Right beside him, there was another person who looked a little sick. His aura seemed powerful, but his energy wasn't stable. The person who was tall and powerful was the one who gasped, and he looked like the leader of the group. His question was directed toward the other person who looked sick. However, the latter shook his head, telling everyone that he didn't know why either. "Who are you?" Jesse asked in a deep voice. He could tell that these 5 people who suddenly appeared were all powerful Moon-class elites, and they were going to be hard to deal with since they held hostility toward this group from Chambord. Therefore, Jesse took a step forward, and a pair of huge silver wings that had a wingspan of more than 20 meters opened on his back gracefully. He adjusted his state of mind and got ready for battle. During this entire process, Faye didn't even move. It felt like he was just a bystander. His eyes locked onto the person who looked sick and had unstable energy. Wings of Bless? The person in the lead was even more surprised. You are so young, yet you have cultivated so much holy energy. It is truly rare. Young man, we are looking for the king of Chambord and not you, and we don't want to fight with someone who is from the Holy Church. You may leave now. It seemed like this person was afraid of the Holy Church and didn't want to touch Jesse. Impossible. Jesse flew into the air and clenched his hands. As a pair of silver light swords appeared in his hands, his silver energy wings fluttered and thrust him forward. As a series of afterimages appeared in the air, he already dashed toward this man and struck down with his swords. This young priest wasn't kind and generous anymore in battle. He was cold and fierce. Boom! That person in the lead didn't move. He raised his hand, and a bright dash of light appeared. He used one of his bare hands to handle Jesse's energy swords, and loud booming noises sounded. After about 5 seconds, Jesse's body flew backward. He didn't hurt that person at all. That man was even more powerful than Jesse, who was a top-tier half-moon elite. However, that wasn't the most shocking discovery. What shocked Jesse the most was that from the short battle, he discovered where these people were really from.